right, so let's get started. Welcome to the Embrace Surrogate Partner live Q&A. We are going to get started with a little bit of setting like the container of our space, and then we'll do some introductions, and then Brian's going to give us a quick catch up on what is surrogate partner therapy. Will we see people or will they be invisible to us too? Brian asked in the chat. We will, the live stream chat, everybody can see that. So that one is where we're gonna pull questions. So let's get started. Lou, go ahead and do some group agreements.
Awesome. Hello. Before introductions, we want to do group agreements. We are here, as you can see, this is being recorded, which is partly why the Embrace team are the only folks who are on video and also on audio. Please be cognizant of the fact that this is recorded and don't put any personal details in the chat. Also, for stuff that does come up or anecdotal client stories that we share, please maintain confidentiality. You are absolutely allowed to leave and go to a dinner party and say, oh my God, I heard the most amazing thing. Surrogate partner therapy is useful in all these different ways, but definitely don't say anything specific about client stories. Hey, technical difficulties overcome. Woohoo! Awesome. Returning to our group agreements, if you would like your name to remain anonymous, please feel free to change it in the chat, though I see most people have selected just initials or first names. That's beautiful. Also, I have to say every time we're going to be talking about surrogate partner therapy. Surrogate partner therapy involves themes of intimacy and human sexual development. We're going to be addressing those in an exceptionally professional way. If anybody in the chat brings those things up, sexualizes us or others, or objectifies people, or is just, not handling that in a mature adult way, we absolutely reserve the right to kick you out. Please don't do that. We would love for you to stay and get some good information. What else? Also, trust that in this mad dash of Q&A, we are going to have to make some choices about which questions to take. If you had something pressing and we didn't take it, there might be a reason for that. There might not be, but please do feel free to email us later and we will get to it with you. We're going to do our best to touch all the big themes, all the questions that are likely to affect most of you. And we will do our best.
Thanks, Lou. We're going to go ahead and Lou, do you want to go ahead and start with the intro since you just spoke?
Sure. My name is Lou Hansen, she, her pronouns. I wear two hats. I am a licensed therapist in DC, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. So I can be a collaborating clinician, but I'm also a certified surrogate partner who works in the greater DC area. Never with the same client.
I'll go. My name is Michelle Renee, she, her pronouns. I am a surrogate partner and professional cuddler in the San Diego area. And I'm interesting in that I like to say I'm a platonic surrogate partner. So maybe we'll talk about that at some point in the Q&A. Jeannie, you want to go?
Sure. I'm Jeannie Miller, she, her. I am a surrogate partner. I'm actually in the process now of relocating from the DC region up to New England. So that'll be interesting to be able to be closer to Brandon, actually.
Brandon, do you want to go?
Yeah, speaking of which, I am a surrogate partner and an intimacy coach based in New England, specifically on Massachusetts land in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I also have a background as a clinical social worker, and so I bring that a little bit to bear, even though I don't occupy that role as a surrogate. So I often speak to clinicians about this.
And Brian.
Hi, y'all. I'm Brian Gibney, he, him. I've been a surrogate partner for about 7 years now. I am in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is about 2.5 hours southwest of Washington, D.C. Work with clients all up and down the East Coast. and do a lot of education, do a lot of outreach, and bridging gap between talk and touch professionals. Shall we just roll into the brief overview of surrogate partner therapy?
Please do.
Awesome. So I'm going to give a.
Can you speak up a little bit?
I don't know. Is my mic okay? Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. I forgot Riverview is a little bit quiet. So I'm going to give a brief overview of surrogate partner therapy. There might be some gaps that any of my colleagues are welcome to fill in, but we want to keep it pretty short so there's plenty of time for y'all to answer your question or ask your questions. So just to start off, surrogate partner therapy has been around for a long time. It started by Masters and Johnson in the 1970s, but most people don't know about it. We've spent a lot of time trying to get the word out about surrogate partner therapy as an organization and as individuals. So if you haven't heard about it, it's not because it's new, it's just because people aren't talking about it. So surrogate partner therapy is a therapeutic modality that helps people overcome challenges to physical and emotional intimacy. We as surrogate partners work with clients from inside of the relationship. So we start off in kind of a professional relationship, but also bring so much of ourselves into the work. Because we bring so much of ourselves into the work, it's really important to have the work with a surrogate partner paired with a clinician, with a therapist. So there's someone on the outside of that relationship that has the kind of like 1,000-foot up view of what's going on, and they can help clients talk about how the work is relating to their current issues, their history in the past, and also how that work may translate to future relationships. Because the ultimate goal is we want people to come out, and if they want to have access to healthy, happy relationships with other people in the future, they will have fewer obstacles. Surrogate partner therapy generally has people come in because they have issues around relationships, physical intimacy, or emotional intimacy. That could be anything from inability to hold good boundaries, to express their wants. There might be specific sexual intimacy issues. And there's a lot of interplay between the sexual relationship issues and the emotional relationship issues. The work in general has a couple of stages. First stage is getting to know you, is kind of assessing what we're working with, how we fit in the room together. It's also skill building. It's really, really important, not just for clients' future relationships, but also how we work in the room together. So we do a lot of somatically or body-informed self-awareness. We do a lot of communication and consent exercises. And we start to learn how to have healthy relationship dynamics. Often folks going through the course of surrogate partner therapy will enter different phases of the work. So learning how to get more in touch, whether it's with objects or with the surrogate's body. Depending on where the work goes, this can be nurturing touch. It could be very platonic, cuddly touch. It could be sensual touch. There's also the potential for erotic touch, but we don't need to go there, right? Many folks come into the work and say, hey, I feel like I need to do the sex to fix the sex. And that's not always the case. So often as we are getting more information about where clients are, how their goals have changed with the new information that they have, we're constantly assessing what do we actually need to do in the work. Whenever we're done with the work, there's always a off-ramping closure period where we learn how to have a healthy end of relationships and also teach clients how to move from surrogate partner therapy into the dating world if they choose to. So when we are working in surrogate partner therapy, there's going to be constant communication between the collaborating clinician and the surrogate partner. That means that if y'all are doing a session with us as a client, we're going to be having a conversation about how that session went with your therapist, and the therapist is able to bring that up in your sessions with them. And you get to talk about that session, process it, and see how the work with us has felt different than experiences in the past. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Just a general overview, there are not many surrogates out there. We do have kind of a database of practicing surrogates that are available, but often travel is a part of it, whether it's on the part of the surrogate or on part of the client. But we, as a resource center, can give you access to surrogate partners. I think if there's Embrace team, is there anything that I missed that you want to add? Because I do want to make space for people's questions.
No, I just want to add that I'm not able to engage with the chat. Unfortunately, it stopped letting me. So Lou posted, and I see Lou. So please put your questions in the chat, and we're going to go from there. We're not going to call on you to speak. It'll just be us reading questions off. So there's no issue with you coming on. Just drop your questions there. Does anybody want to start out of our team?
Well, we actually have a question. We've got a couple questions coming in right now.
Great.
You want to handle one of those, Brandon?
Let's see. Have you worked with widowed folks who have lost their ability to have feelings of arousal? I can tell you that while I haven't worked with somebody who is widowed per se, I have worked with clients who, within their relationships and their partner hasn't necessarily died, but because of an accident or illness, the much of not only the erotic but the actual touch element of that relationship, they had to mourn. It's not accessible to them, and so in a way that's a kind of death within the relationship, and in very, very long-term relationships, especially if that touch dynamic has been very exclusive to that pair or that dynamic, it can feel like the other person, the person who is not necessarily experiencing the illness or whatever the huge physical change or the trauma was, to experience their own death of arousal, their own death of desire. And I am currently working with something like that. Yeah. Anybody worked with widows?
Yeah, I fielded one recently that was a widow, and I think it's a really useful mode to get together with somebody who's in a very vulnerable state to say, now that my arousal and sexuality and intimacy is also tangled up in grief, how do we redefine what it takes to feel safe and get a new idea of what intimacy moving forward looks like? And that's why we have therapists with us.
Yeah. And that's not, it is different in some ways, but not too different from folks that are ending a long-term relationship, right? That are divorced, that are, trying to figure out what it's like to have a healthy relationship, have healthy sexuality, date in this crazy world, with new people.
I want to throw in a resource real quick because it's so pertinent to this question. Joan Price has a book called Sex After Grief that I highly, highly recommend. It might be a great starting point.
I see we have one of our other questions is what training do therapists need to be fit for collaborating with a surrogate partner to support a client? And there's not I would say there's not a hard and specific training that is required. There are some trainings out there. For example, Surrogate Partner Collective periodically offers a CE um, uh, for therapists about working with surrogate partners in the triadic model that we would recommend, it can be really helpful, to kind of do your homework, learn about through things like this about the SPT model. It can be helpful to talk to other therapists who have experience doing these kinds of collaborations, which is why we recently started offering a peer um, a peer consultation space for clinicians working doing SPT cases. Um, and I wonder if any of my colleagues would like to jump in about this. But most therapists, I would say, that I've talked to or work with in this work don't have a lot of experience with it because SPT is still a relatively small field, and so it's peer consultation can be really helpful, and finding workshops and things like that.
And I'm just popping that in the chat so people can look back at it.
Yeah, so there are links in the
Thanks
chat.
for those.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Jeannie, for that. So there are links to these resources that we offer. So through Embrace, we actually have a clinical collaboration group, which is what Jeannie was referencing, which meets twice a month, and it's facilitated by myself and Lou and one other surrogate / clinician, Percy, and we host this group as a meeting between clinicians to talk about working in the triadic model, which is the triadic framework in which surrogate partner therapy happens, case consultation, help with treatment planning, help with obstacles. It's a really great space to be able to show up. And that one is for clinicians. And then we have separate offering that is info groups, which are 90 minutes long, and those are for prospective clients. We also host those twice a month.
I would like to jump in and add that means that ideally therapists, if you're like simmering on this potential idea, it's really great for you to come to a clinical consultation group, talk to the group about a case, vet it, see our ideas. We might say, yes, absolutely, sounds great. Ask questions, brainstorm about it, really carve out the like, what could this look like for this person? And then you can send your client to the info sessions to really get an idea of the model. And then you can consult with a specific surrogate partner, and then the client can vet the specific surrogate partner. So this is one of the ways where that information or that decision tree can work so that both you and the client get good intel about surrogate partner therapy specifically, or I should say generally, and then break it down to more specifically which surrogate partner you're working to select.
And with that, there was an earlier question that we had that laces right into an earlier question we had, which was, as a therapist, how do you assess if a client would be a good fit for SPT? Great question. The very short answer is SPT is often intended for folks who have those obstacles to emotional and physical intimacy, for whom talk therapy has not been able to help them resolve it, nor have they been able to engage in or sustain life experience to navigate those obstacles, even with the supportive therapy, right? And so what is required is an experiential place that is the convergence of therapy and real world experience with a dedicated trained partner, right, who is using their personhood and their skills and their somatic awareness and their presence in their body to be in the here and now with the client, to learn skills and to share lived experiences, so that client can take that lived experience then and generalize it with the help of the therapist across their life, and hopefully gain new access to relationships that they want. So now this is just actually a two-part to your question: assessing if a client would be good for SPT. So in assessing fitness, we need to do two things: assess for the fitness of the modality in general, like SPT in general, and then we also need to assess for fitness with the surrogate. Those are two different things, right? So somebody might be a great candidate for SPT, but finding the right surrogate might be a different story, right? We're all very different. Like, we all have very similar training and expertise, but because SPT is such a personal experience. We bring a lot of our own personality and our style to it. So a lot of it is really assessing the fitness with the client, because it's a very intimate relationship. It has the capacity to be very intimate. So those are two different things that need to be sort of sussed out in the beginning when forming a triadic model or a triad with a surrogate. I'm curious if my colleagues have thoughts on in general what makes for a good candidate for SPT, and what might be some things that would not make a person a good candidate for SPT.
The first thing that I look for is their ability to self-reflect. I think if there's a lack of like that internal awareness or desire to look internally to see how am I contributing to the situation, it's kind of a no-go if there's not that ability. That's like the first thing that I ask a therapist is like, what is that? Where did this client sit with that ability?
I often look for folks that have a good relationship with their therapist, a good working relationship with their therapist. And that definitely feeds into what you were talking about, Michelle. Like, are clients able to reflect? Do they have those therapeutic skills built up through the practice of talk therapy? But also, is the relationship with a therapist good and can keep pace with the relationship in surrogate partner therapy? Because our work is kind of like intimacy on steroids, right? And it's very hard to, as a therapist, scramble to keep up with that if you don't already have a relationship with your client. So that's something that's very, very helpful to me.
Yeah, this is why I always think it's ideal if somebody is able to really spend time doing work on their own and with a talk therapist for a while, really, to sort of understand where their challenges are, where their skills and strengths are. Have a good rapport, ideally, with the talk therapist before we start the process. It doesn't always work out that way, but I find that it's really helpful for the work, that somebody has done as much as sort of gone as far as they can in their process in talk therapy and with other ways working these issues, so that they're sort of most ready to sort of jump into the container of SPT.
I really appreciate your question, Wendy. I was just going to jump in on that note too. If there's no ability to self-reflect in clients, does that mean that clients with intellectual disabilities generally are not a good fit for SPT? And I will say that I have worked with a number of folks that I would say would fall in the camp of Asperger's and of an Asperger's diagnosis, and that it's different, right? That I think that because it is so deeply relational and it's about kind of discovering the internal world of intimacy, that absolutely when we are optimizing surrogate partner therapy, we're doing a ton of that self-reflection. It is also true that depending on what social skills coaching within an intimate relationship folks with intellectual disabilities need, it may still be the best option. It just looks different, right? And instead of being in the relationship in quite the same way, then often we're taking on slightly more of a coaching role. And I say that because, one of the taglines in surrogate partner therapy, one of my mantras is the surrogate partner is the barometer in the room, right? And so when it comes to you put your arm around me, I'm going to know in my body, did it feel like it happened too fast? Did it feel like it was rigid? And some of that nuance is not kind of what we're going for. Whereas we're hoping for, I guess I'll call them advanced clients, typical clients, neurotypical clients. There we go. That a lot more of the like, how do you attune well is going to be a focus. Whereas I find folks with intellectual disabilities, I really do a lot more of the social skills coaching of instead of focusing on attunement, which can often be harder for folks in that camp, that then I say, ask, right? Ask, I'm thinking about putting my arm around you. Does it feel okay when I do it this way? And that's the skill and the attunement to like making sure that I'm tracking along with them and it's feeling good and right in my body is not quite the same. I'm certainly going to make sure we're talking about respect and we're talking about consent, but it is a slightly different part of the spectrum of how we engage in the model. But again, if part of what you're trying to jump into with a client with intellectual disabilities is social skills coaching that does include physical touch, that does include the sort of relational, how do we talk about bodies, how do we touch bodies, then it may still be the best option.
Yeah, and if it feels cool, I'd like to add a little bit. This is not a modality where we are doing something to clients. We're doing something collaborating with the clients as well, right? So clients might often come in and say, I don't even know if I want to kiss someone. I don't know if I want to hold someone's hand, right? So setting up a safe container where they can do those experiments and then come back and process them in the container of talk therapy can be really, really useful. Often folks with developmental or intellectual disabilities might say, I can't do relationships because I don't want the sex, right? That makes me feel icky. Okay, let's figure out what doesn't make you feel icky, what makes you feel good, right? Maybe you just want to hold hands and go on walks, and that's fine. And that becomes their owner's manual for future relationships.
Are we ready to go to another question? Okay. I like to comment, thinking about intimacy on steroids. I'm curious if there are challenges that come up with attachment, either in general or specific attachment styles. And I think, when I think about our work, I think it is a lot of attachment work. I think that's what we're looking for, is for these attachment styles to show up in a place where we get to, play is probably a little too of a friendly word, but we get to interact with those attachment styles or those patterns that show up for these people in their lives. And we get to address them in this, I call it my laboratory, but the laboratory setting where we get to have our experience of those attachments, and then get to talk to their talk therapist, and we get to also talk to their talk therapist about our experience with those attachment habits.
I would like to add briefly, like, the great thing about this system, this container, is that like the stakes are pretty low. You're not working on attachment styles as you're dating someone, right? And it's not like, oh, if this relationship ends, I'll never be able to experience a relationship again. You're working with someone who can like be a mirror for you as well as a pillow, and be like, oh, we're working together to figure out, when these things come up. And we have enough self-awareness to feel what it feels like in the room to deal with our own attachment styles, with your attachment styles, which someone out in the wild probably doesn't have.
Yeah, a related question, I guess we get to this is, well, what happens, if clients become attached? Like, that's part of the point, right? And so that's why we talk up front about the fact that, like, this is a process. This is a therapeutic, healing, growing process that's going to have that, like most relationships, or ultimately all relationships in life, is going to have a beginning, middle, and an end. We talk up front about the fact that there is going to be a point of closure, and the attachment is like welcome and invited in the space. And intimacy is welcome and invited in the space. And at some point, we're gonna identify that, like, you've kind of met a lot of your goals, and we're ready to move towards closure. And we're going to talk about how to celebrate, everything that you've learned, and all the ways we've connected, and be able to say goodbye, which is also important relationship skills. And be able to have the support of the therapist in generalizing that work and moving on. I think that's a big piece of how we think about attachment in this work. Does anybody want to speak to this question about triggers or dissociation?
I love that we've got this beautiful question about triggers and dissociation. And I will say a theme that I really like to speak to is that coming into this work as a client, your brain is your brain. Your flavor of neurospice is your flavor of neurospice. Your flavor of trauma is real. It's true for you. It's going to move with you through your life. And like, yes, absolutely. Experiences of being safe in new things is going to help that to become hopefully less challenging on your part. But really, some of the most beautiful benefit that can come from the surrogate partner and client experience with triggers is knowing, okay, if I'm the one who gets triggered, how am I going to explain to a new partner when that might happen and what's going to help me the most? And it's okay if you don't know that yet, because you and your therapist and the surrogate can talk about, we don't know how to do this yet. Can we figure out what works for me so that you have the language and the confidence to go into your next relationship and say, I do know that I like this. I also know that sometimes when it happens, some intense stuff could happen to my brain. That's not your responsibility. That's about me and the way that I'm hardwired. But here's what we should do with it if it shows up in the room. And then that is then something that you get to carry with you, right? It's not that we come in with the magic wand. It's that you are the one who is going to go into every future relationship, and you want to have the ability to help people understand what that is, right? Whether that is, again, with the neurospice, like, hey, sometimes I have a hard time picking up on social cues. If it feels like I'm doing something dismissive, please let me know it's not intentional at all. Any time that we can learn how to offer a future partner feedback on the way we work, it really helps to clarify our intentions and smooth out those interactions.
We might
Would
find
to
also
add that when we are, oh, go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
I was just going to riff right on that, the end of what Lou was saying, because also what we offer in that experience is, as the surrogate, this is the laboratory. This is the space in which we are dedicated to figuring out what is the language of your relationship, right? What is your body in relationship? How do you experience space with another person, right? How do you experience touch and sensation? What is sensation like for you? We spend a lot of time doing that. And we don't have our own agenda. This is your chance to experience that with a person who doesn't have, because we're a trained professional, right? And we don't have, unlike a partner you're trying to navigate and build a relationship out in the world, they're going to have their own needs and their own agendas that are at the forefront, right, of their intention of connecting. And with us, we don't have our overarching agenda is to collaborate with you on the goals that you have for yourself, right, and to collaborate with the clinician, right. So first of all, we don't have our own host of needs and agendas that are coming in with us. We'll have our limits and our boundaries, right, and we'll have elements of our needs and desires as it's relevant to doing the work, as it's relevant to giving you an opportunity to hearing a person's needs and desires and having a chance to respond to that. But it's only going to be in service to your goals, right, in the way that we do it. The second thing is when you're afforded the experiences that Lou was talking about, will you, first of all, are allowed to notice, value, and communicate your own experience in real time with another person who is not going to turn away from you or argue with you or punish you for it. You may find that there's a kind of resilience that can be afforded to that. So even things that might have been historically much more delicate triggers, right? Or the severity and duration of even some kinds of dissociations might become, you might find a different kind of resilience because you've lived through now a relationship where you have more confidence in articulating yourself. You're more familiar with noticing what's going on with you and then making that speakable with another person, knowing that you have experience in somebody who can hear that and receive it, and then teaching somebody how to respond to you. And that has a major impact, I think, on our nervous system, which can afford us actually greater conditioning and greater resilience in the future. Brian, what were you going to say? I'm really interested.
I mean, you just did it. You're good.
I would love to add that, so something that often is a surprise to both therapists and clients is that ruptures happen in surrogate partner therapy, and they're exceptionally important. This is where the work happens. It's not that the work got waylaid or there was a hiccup or something went wrong. It's like, that's what the work is to find out, what do we do with the whole ass another human being with their own history and their own trauma and their own nervous system acting up in the moment when this happens. And it is okay. This is how we learn. Oh, interesting. When you needed that thing, that hit me in a strange way. I had sensitivity around that. And what do we do with it? I've absolutely had experiences as a surrogate partner where a client had a feeling of betrayal and really pushed away and was like, I'm feeling betrayed, therefore you hurt me, are being malicious and whatnot, and learning, oh, hey, turns out I have a really hard time untangling these feelings from the intention of the person with me and the kindness and the repair of the person with me because of my family of origin trauma and whatnot. Like, that's so useful because that's something that will come with you. And then as a team, we get to support, okay, so if that's there, what do we do with it? Right? You're not a bad person because it's there. You're not broken or unworthy because it's there. It's just a part of what happens in the brain and the nervous system. And that's what we're here to figure out. Like, how do we do this in relationship in a way that feels good?
Yeah, this is something that I will talk about with a client, with a therapist. We're thinking about beginning the work. Is that part of relationships? Is there may be conflicts, there may be ruptures, there very likely will be some friction, at least at some point. And so, if you keep that in the back of our mind, because that will be part of the work. Is what's coming up here, and how can we address it, care for it. And move through together. And then I'm able to say, when we're deep into the work and a rupture happens, some abandonment issues come up, there's anger that comes up, maybe, can say, yes, well, just as we predicted, here we are. And it is not the end of the world, and we're gonna deal with it with care.
Oh, I do want to say a little bit more to trauma if there's space for that. The surrogate partner therapy is especially good in helping clients who have experiences of trauma that continue to live in their bodies. Because one of the things that we do is we look for that working edge, right? Like, what is accessible to you, the client, and we're not trying to white knuckle our way through that, right? We're not saying like, this is going to be hard, but you just have to get over it. No, like we find that place where there is access to feeling just like the little bit of a twinge of that trauma response. And then we work in that space. And it's a wonderful way to feel safe, feel held, and help your body and brain rewire those experiences. And as we go through that in a very titrated way, titrated meaning like little itsy bitsy steps, the volume on those responses get turned down.
That leads me to a question I think would be great to hear an answer from each of you around is, what is that thing that you think clients are mistaken about when they come into the work that you wish that they understood differently? And if you want, I have mine because it was based on what you just said, Brian, and I'd be happy to go with it. I see people come in and they think they know what they're supposed to do. And so they're like, I should be able to do XYZ. So I'm going to make sure I do XYZ, even though my body does not feel safe doing XYZ. That somehow, if I keep doing it, somehow my body will get used to it. And I always have to slow them down and remind them that we have to let our bodies know that they are safe before we can do the thing that feels a little more edgy. We have to build that relationship with ourselves to say, I'm going to first take care of me. That's like the first part of the work, is learning to slow down and not push past that feeling of safety. And then once that gets established, it's a little easier to take those risks, but we can't bypass what our body like feels. We have to build up that relationship with ourselves before we can move into that, whatever XYZ is.
I think for me, my favorite thing is when clients realize they don't need me anymore, right? And it can come at anywhere in the work, right? I've worked with someone who, after one session, was like, I just really needed to be in the room with a man who heard my no and respected my no and know what that felt like. And she's like, now that I know what that feels like, I can look for that somewhere else, and I can do my own work around that. Um, and I've worked with clients who are like, you know what? I thought I came into this work thinking that I needed to do the sex so I could get over my issues, and you were the way to do that. And I don't like, and they're like, no offense, I don't want to have sex with you anymore. I'm like, great, that's fine. Because like they want to be able to build that with other people that they have a relationship with in the wild. And that feels great too, right? Like everybody finds their own stopping point, their own doneness. And being on that journey with them is really, really fulfilling. Lou, we can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Brian. I think my favorite is that, especially folks who come into the work saying, I can't get to sex in my organic relationships. I have too much anxiety around sex. I have sexual dysfunction, which I don't think is a thing, but people sometimes come in thinking that. And then some session when we're doing practice spooning, and then we just start talking about our day, and we're laying in bed talking about the day and have this moment of eye gazing. There is this moment where people say so consistently, oh, sex wasn't the thing at all. This was the thing. This was the thing I was wanting. And that's beautiful, because I think so much of the time sex gets conflated with intimacy. And in the surrogate partner therapy relationship, you get to have so much more intimacy than just the physical touch, that so frequently by the time you get to any sexually focused touch, people are like, actually, I'm good because this communication is so solid. I feel like I would know how to do this. This is fine. Right. And the sex wasn't the thing moment. It's my favorite.
I think that, gosh, there's so many different versions of the answers to this question, Michelle. But I mean, I think that so much of it comes down to, um, and listen, we all experience some form of this, right? Is thinking like there is some right way that we are supposed to be or do or experience or want intimacy, sex, relationships, right? And so sometimes folks will come in and think like, oh, you're going to work with me and I'm going to learn how to do the thing right. As opposed to like figuring out what what is the right way for them. Or that I'm going to fix them, as opposed to like, they're gonna, they are going to, they are going to build their skills and confidence and their inner resources and, you know, not fix, but, heal and grow themselves in connection with me, right? Yeah. And that's okay. I'll tell people like, our idea, I sometimes it's a struggle to define what is like the goal of the client's goals from the process. Like at the beginning, sometimes they have, some very, very specific idea and like, okay, we can start there. And sometimes it's a struggle. And I say it's okay because regardless of where we start, the sense of the goals is probably going to evolve or it's going to be refined, or your perspective on it is going to change a little bit. And, um, I may have my own sense as I'm getting to know you of like, what I think a revised or evolve, what the goal might evolve into. I'm going to try not to impose that too much on the process, uh, to give it space to evolve, because this is we're going to be really connecting, and we don't know, where it's going to go. It's often what comes out of this process is kind of it emerges from the connection, from being close. Um,
Mhm.
and so, I think part of it is being open to them. But I think like with so many things, right? Like we've kind of we've programmed, we've evolved we've inherited the idea that there's a right way to be that we're supposed to fit into. Um, and so much of the work is trying to get beyond that.
I think one of the biggest lessons, maybe, or something that we live into, the most valuable thing that we live into in the course of our work, I work with clients, is that if you want a relationship to be really alive, it has to have care and repair. Because if you have just one, you've got a problem. If you have a relationship that only emphasizes care and only emphasizes the prevention of any possible harm, any possible mistake, you're going to disappear in that relationship. Some person is going to have to abandon themselves to become so preoccupied with caring for another, they can fade away, can become codependent. If a relationship only has repairs, that's usually a sign that somebody isn't caring enough to learn, right? To pay attention, to take in what their partner needs them to learn about them. They're not willing to learn. But if we have care and repair, and we're doing both of those things simultaneously, and that's when we really make good on the inherent risk of all relationships. You get nothing in this world without risk, nothing. And choosing to take risks by becoming more equipped with what you are learning that you're capable of and knowing what you want, which is what we offer. Like part of what we offer in SPT is, do you want to learn more about what you actually want and what it feels like to ask for and receive what you actually want? And can you survive conflict? Can you navigate and survive conflict? Because a relationship that you can learn how to care and teach somebody how to care for you and invest in caring for them, and then also survive the inevitability that somebody's going to fuck up at some point in time. Somebody's going to get something wrong, right? But come through that conflict, that's when I think trust is really, the other half of trust is linked together, kind of like a locket. Like you get one side of trust that's built in the front end with care and prevention, and then you get the other side that locks into place when you actually go through a conflict with somebody. And we offer that experience in SPT because we're not afraid. I mean, it's scary. Conflict is scary, but we're not afraid of the inevitability of that. In fact, we bet on it, right? And it could be really small, right? It doesn't mean that every case is a traumatic blowout, but it could be really small, and it needs to happen because that's how relationships work. So care and repair goes together, and that we can take risks. You have to.
Great answers.
Thanks. We have another question in the chat that I would love to jump in on, which actually links up to a point I was hoping to get to. So here we go. Is about when you may be experiencing an aversion to like assigned male at birth, like to male bodies generally, right? That like, can I use things like surrogate partner therapy to address that? I personally, and I'm the men in the room especially, please feel free to jump in and share. Personal note, and I know we're being recorded, so making smart choices about how to share. Definitely went through a somewhat similar journey recently with myself where my relationship with men changed. And recognizing that in the surrogate partner therapy space, while your surrogate partner is a professional for sure, by nature, that person is showing up with a good amount of themselves. I made the choice for me to work with a sexological body worker because of one-way touch, because interactionally, my needs, my wants, my assessment, my stuff had permission to take up all the space and to kind of use the professional, as it were, with the idea that then from that place, using this, male body for my own kind of attunement and checking, and what do I need? What do I feel I need in order to find safety in space with a male body? And then once I got an idea of what that was, being like, okay, now I feel like I can go into a space with a male person who brings a self along with that, and to develop the relational piece of that. And so, which is to say that also, if you come to the clinical consultation group, or if you go to info sessions, something that I will say all good surrogate partners do, not all surrogate partners, all good surrogate partners are decently well versed in the spectrum of modalities that are in our like adjacent fields, and will absolutely talk with you about, does this sound like a great case for SPT? Or maybe you want to start with a cuddleist, or maybe you want to start with a sexological body worker, maybe you want to start with a somatica worker. There are lots of adjacent fields that come with different flavors of healing and attunement in this way. And so I think it's also very fair to come in saying, maybe SPT, but other ideas welcome. And that should be a real active conversation. All right, men, chime in. I'm so curious about your experiences and thoughts on this one.
Can I chime first, Brandon? Awesome. So this is not uncommon at all, right? I work primarily with AFAB, with assigned female at birth folks, and one of the things that I notice universally as we go through the first parts of the work is they come back to me and they say, my relationship with men in general has changed, right? I feel like I can take up that space in the room. I feel like I can assert my boundaries. And because I can do that, I feel much safer being in a closed room with my boss, right? I'm not having the panic attacks that I used to. I can be at family events and not dissociate. I can have a pelvic exam and I cannot have my body tense up so much that I'm in huge amounts of pain. Right? This is something that they're like ripples that come out of the work, and some of the ripples are not just how you exist in romantic or sexual relationships, but how you exist in other relationships with people outside of the surrogate partner relationship or your romantic relationship. And this is one of them, of just a general felt sense of safety and agency with people around you.
Well, I think where I'd start is Brian is hinting at it directly, which is agency. To me, it's about choice, right? So where I would start is, why is it a problem for you to choose not to work with men, or to have men be your provider? I understand that there's access things that we're talking about too, like you might have limited options in terms of healthcare and stuff like that. But in general, start with owning the choice. Choose not to. Choose not to be in certain kinds of spaces with men, and let yourself have that choice. Like really have it. Let yourself really have that choice, and not a choice that you feel like you're forced into because you ought to choose differently. But really let yourself have that choice and occupy it. And just say I don't do such and such with men right now. And also that you might and you can change your mind at some point. I do the same thing with the smallest interaction with clients when we work together. Long before we even touch. I'm talking about just where we are in the room. Where I'm sitting, where they're sitting, how long they stay. When I book a session with the client, obviously they book for my time, right? And this is a little bit of a logistical thing too, so it might be helpful information. This is something I do. If somebody books for my time, I schedule that window, and I do get paid for that window, right? So because I've set that side of time, I'm not working with someone else during that time period. However, if at any point in time that client becomes saturated or overwhelmed or overstimulated, or they just need to go, more than a break, we take breaks. But if they're done, if their doneness is hit, they can leave whenever they want. And what I'll do is I will roll over that time to the next booking that they have. Whatever the remainder of the time is, I'll roll that over to the next booking that they have. Because why? Because yes, it's important that we honor time boundaries and that I am compensated for my time. But what's really valuable is the moment they can say, I'm done and I want to leave. And they can leave, and they make the choice to leave. And I say, great, let me know when you want to begin again, right? And they pay me for the time that they were actually there. And then the rest of the remainder of the time, I credit that, because they've already paid me for it. I credit that to the next booking that they have. And maybe over time we learn a pattern and we say, hey, I'm noticing maybe we book for a little less time, right? We seem to be within this sort of window, so maybe we book for 1 hour instead of 2, right? Or 90 minutes instead of 3 hours. So sometimes people start really ambitious. But learning that we have a choice, and it comes back to what Betty Martin has taught me and so many others, is that until you're confident that you have a choice about what happens to you, until you're confident that you have a choice about what happens to you, there's no way for you to enjoy sensuality or intimacy. There's no way. So identifying and occupying your choice is a core feature of our work that we do with clients here.
And this shows up early in the work in a case that I was clinician for. I remember a session where the client, who similarly really struggled to share space with men specifically, said, okay, right, under the guidance of the surrogate, what do we do to access safety? How do we get your nervous system feeling more at ease? And it meant she got to be real fucking close to the door, and she got to leave her shoes on, and the surrogate partner was on the other side of the room with his shoes off, specifically because I get to leave. I'll hide your keys in the bed, and I get to keep my keys on me, right? And you can get so creative about how that is set up. But like, you do sometimes need a really big and really expansive sandbox to play around with, like, what do I need to feel safe in that way? How can I? And then if you do choose to continue to pursue titrating into closer proximity, then you have all the creativity, all the space in the world to do that.
Well, this was a great fast hour. We are at a little past the top of the hour, so we need to say thank you. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for being here. We want to remind you that Embrace Surrogate Partner Resource Group is a nonprofit, and we would love to take your donations. So if you find this hour useful, head over to embracespt.org and find that contribution menu item at the top, and say thank you. We would love to have it.
Yeah. If you want to learn more, whether you're a prospective client or a prospective collaborating clinician, check out the relevant offerings on our website as well. Thank you all. This has been a really great conversation.
Thanks, everybody.